I know it just came like directly from like.
Hey, I'll try and make sure. Yeah, what do you? Is that to take to video it?
Yeah.
I'll try and get a couple of photos of you talking with the crowd, and maybe you do the same. So we build up a little sort of collection of photos of like, here are the events. Because I tried taking pictures of you at one time, and you're just silhouetted. You know, it's really hard to get decent photos.
No worries.
Es muy difícil. ¿Dónde está mi amigo de trabajo?
No sé.
No sé, ni yo tampoco.
We'll get started in about 10.
In about 10?
These guys like out messages it's like now I'm telling you it's like that's good time. It's like UI, UX. Web dev is super trendy. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Putting so much in, but at the same time, they were
Okay, we're going to get started in 5 minutes, so if everyone can grab a seat.
Manchester next to you?
If you don't have a seat, feel free to grab one of the stools, or there's quite a lot of seating available.
Grab a stool, bro.
Cool. Rightio. Thanks everyone for making it today. Pretty good turnout for a bear market, I must say. Well, depending on what the US dollar decides to do to the whole of the global economy. I was hoping we could turn the music down, but still waiting on the gentleman at the bar to help us out. Yeah. Anyway, so just get into it. So for those of you who are not aware, yeah, we're ATB, and we generally like to present about different topics on almost every fortnight now. Every month we have the normal ATB meetup, and on the other fortnight we have the NFT meetup, which is this one. So today I'll be taking you a bit more through ATB. I'll take you through Artlink, my project, which we're sponsoring tonight, the food, and obviously into the main topics: Sudoswap NFT marketplace, FX hash, and we'll finish off with a bit of a giveaway and some networking. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're all things blockchain. Any new attendees, first time attendees in the room? Nice. Always love seeing you people coming over. So yeah, thanks. And yeah, in terms about what we do, we're a blockchain agnostic, non-for-profit association, and we hold educative events and meetups and networking events to spread the blockchain knowledge. Thanks to all of our sponsors, we are able to hold one meetup at least a month. And yes, I won't go through all of them, but thanks to these sponsors, we have one meetup per month. And yeah, if you'd like to stay in touch with what we're doing, there's a QR code there to follow our socials, and as well as the meetup group, and also our past slide decks. In terms of upcoming events, we do Crypto Coffee once a month as well, if I'm not mistaken, at the Crypto Coffee in New Farm. So this is for pure beginners. If you want to know how to operate a wallet and securely transact with exchanges, etc., etc.
No exchanges, that is pure your own blockchain.
As in custodian, just wallets, okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Thank you. We also have our good friends, the Aus DeFi Association. They're holding their meetups once a month as well, on the third week of every month. Their next one, thank you! Their next one is in October, on the 20th. And yeah, venue TBA. They had the last one here actually, which is how we found out about this venue.
I'm pretty sure it's here.
It is?
It is.
Yeah, okay, cool. And yeah, important notice. So as I mentioned, we're a not-for-profit, but we are also a decentralized meetup in terms of we're a traditional association, and we're registered with the government as a non-for-profit association. Because of that, we have to actually hold an AGM every year in December to elect committee members. And yeah, our upcoming one is on the 8th of December. And yeah, if you're part of the meetup group, you'll get an email about that and how to nominate for a position. We've got a couple of other NFT show meetups coming up for the rest of the year to close out the year. In October, I'm trying to line up some local NFT artists, both in the street art space and yeah, in various different arts realms. And then in November, we're going to do a legal tax Q&A session with David's here in the room, David Chung from Creo Legal, Marina from Covert Tax, and Susanna from Herbert Smith Free Hills Lawyers. So yes, in terms of the sponsor for tonight, that's ArtLink, that's my project. Tell you a bit about that, and then I'll hand it off to Rafe, who will just do a bit of a warm the room before we get into the night's topics. So in terms of ArtLink, as the name suggests, we are about linking art to different forms of monetization. So what does that mean? It means we take it for granted, as in we accept that there'll be more and more NFT marketplaces coming up, and we want to be that middleware layer between the secondary market and the means of helping NFT owners monetize their assets. So, give you some examples of what I mean. You could have this NFT on Foundation by its artist called Baka. He could allow owners of his NFT to stake it on ArtLink, and by stake I mean deposit it or license it to ArtLink. And we could then liaise with out-of-home advertisers to serve that as an advert. So that's use case one. Use case two, you could have, again, something on OpenSea, like an Avastar there. We could allow that NFT owner to monetize it on some merch. And use case three, Pack has some art on known origin, if I'm not mistaken. And we could put that into a series of magazines in terms of product placement from an advertising perspective. So those are just a few of the use cases we're trying to enable. In terms of where we sit versus other projects, we like to call ourselves a fully on-chain licensing protocol for NFTs. And what I mean by that is we want to do all of the licensing aspects on-chain. So no PDFs and no signing or messages. So the actual license agreement itself is an NFT. The collection of the royalties and the licensing revenue is done on-chain. And we also have an API which we plug into print-on-demand marketplaces. So that's just a bit of an overview of where we sit versus other projects. Yes, granted, a couple of them are a bit further ahead than we are in terms of adoption, but what we're building is something very much general purpose. So we've taken a lot of time to make sure what we're doing has a long runway. And yeah, one of our first go-to-market products is Merch Nation. You can go there today. Merch.io is the domain name, and you can actually create designs using licensed NFTs. Right, before I go into Sudoswap, I'll let Rafe take over and just do a bit of an intro and a bit of a Q&A with the room, and then we'll get into the rest of the topic.
Hi, thanks for coming along tonight. My name is Rafe and I gave a talk. Did anyone see the NFT talk about 3 months ago where me and Drew gave a talk about?
And Jason, no.
Yeah, go on.
Jason, is it Jason Pollock?
Yep.
Yeah.
From Providence, Rhode Island.
Well, that's right.
If anyone was there, you'll know that it's
Yeah.
my joke.
Yeah. So I'm grateful to Danielle for interjecting so robustly like that, because what I wanted to say was this is a meetup where people are in a room. If you've got something to say it. Right? It's not a lecture from on high by world-renowned experts. Well, I'm not one. And if I say something that you don't understand or you don't agree with, then say that, because I've probably just read, I'm one blog post ahead of you on some of this stuff, as we say in the tech industry, right? It's changing so quickly. And you're here now, so you may as well say something. I don't want to, I hate going to these NFT or Bitcoin meetups where everyone just sits in reverent silence as some guy talks about some DeFi nonsense, right? And you know, it's like I could have just watched a YouTube video. So we're here in a pub with pizza and beer. If you've got something to ask, say it. I'm working currently. Well, I'm finishing tomorrow, but that's another story. For DLTX, so I'm in the industry just like Stefan. So how many people here? What I want to know is, because I don't know the level at which people are knowledgeable about NFTs. How many people here own an NFT that they're aware of? Because people send you someone that you can't get rid of. How many? On Ethereum, I suppose, right? Or yeah, okay. How about Tezos? Yeah, that usually clears everyone out. That usually good, because if I start speaking about Tezos, you won't know if I've just made it up. I told you. That's cool. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll hand it back to Stefan. He can talk about Sudoswap, which is a very exciting new website. I blogged about this. I was so excited about it. I don't blog about a lot of things, but this got me really excited, and I blogged about it. It's at ravell.net, because I honestly think it's going to change the way that people approach NFTs. I told Kenny from MetaConnect. Does anyone know that great art gallery up in Baringa near Calandra called MetaConnect? Do we all know about that? They hang NFTs on the wall, if you don't mind. It's fantastic. Go up there. He's doing so much work. He was on a podcast recently. They've got these wooden frames, which is kind of weird for NFTs. That's the way since the Middle Ages people have hung up pictures. So that's a curious choice that he's made. But anyway, it's in a new residential area, light industrial area called Baringa, Queensland, near Calandra, and it's the first walk-in NFT gallery in Australia that I'm aware of. You can go in on Saturdays only, and bloody well buy a Bored Ape or something. They have one. Well, if you've got 100 grand, if you've got 100 grand. Yeah.
Or is it about Pepe?
Yeah, they kind of, they're a little bit, they're muddying the waters a little bit about that, but they do have a Bored Ape.
Someone bought a punch today, it's like 300
It was probably Kenny from MetaConnect. Anyway, that's.
Do you know why they call them bored apes? Because it's boring to look at apes? No, because they're bored.
It's not boring to look at apes, so it can't be that reason. Jeez. I'll send you some videos and you'll tell me if they're boring. I'm sure it's not boring with any simians, actually.
I just thought you might know why they called it.
It was the whole board meme, which Kenny is using a lot, comes from Bored Ape. They just picked it because they said, imagine there was a bunch of apes so rich they just sat around and played with the yachts in a swamp. I know, right? It's not that old chestnut again, right? And it just took off from then. So bored is kind of a mean word for like we do NFTs. All right, here's Stefan with a little chat about Sudoswap.
All right, thanks Ray for the lively introduction as always. Cool, so Sudoswap. Before I get into it, I'm just going to take a bit of a step back and talk about market making, because it relates to what Sudoswap is. So I'm just going to refer to this definition of a market maker as basically someone who essentially provides liquidity on an exchange, be it a stock market or a centralized exchange or even a decentralized exchange. So it's someone who makes sure that if you want to buy or sell stocks, crypto, NFTs, there's enough liquidity there to buy and sell that asset. So yeah, that's a market maker. Now, I was going to show this video, however, we can't connect my laptop to the speakers, so I might have to skip it.
It's great to have a purpose.
Okay.
A reason for doing what you do. So what is
Can
about
everyone hear that?
purpose? What difference do we make? What's our delta? We found inspiration in the story of Amsterdam and the spice trade. 17th century shipping was incredibly expensive, so merchants teamed up with investors, a relationship which benefited them both. But it didn't only help them. It also led to increased trade, as spice makers got connected to new markets. Consumers enjoyed lower prices, a shipping industry boomed, and whole new industries popped up. Unfortunately, the risk of losing everything was putting investors off, so they invented shares to let them literally share the risks. But when it came to buying and selling these shares, they quickly discovered that it takes two to trade. They needed a willing buyer or seller, one that would always be ready to trade. And in 1626, on a bridge near Dam Square, they got them, the first market makers. These specialists in the market for shares knew that the same share bought in Amsterdam could be sold in Antwerp, or one bought in the morning could be sold in the afternoon. These market makers had no view on whether the shares would go up or down. They simply made a profit from selling for a tiny fraction higher than what they paid. And with a ready market for shares, investing became much more attractive. Companies could easily raise new capital, leading to more ships and more spice trade. The world has changed, but the story remains the same. Companies and governments need money to make things happen, and investors are looking to earn some reward. Market makers lower the entry barrier to the market as they ensure that investors can buy and sell their shares at any time. And trust in the efficiency of the market makes it easier for companies and governments to raise new capital. Looking at the long history of trading, we have seen that the activity of market makers like Optiva makes markets transparent, as we consistently show out buying and selling prices, and makes markets more liquid, as we are always willing to buy or sell, making it easier for investors to transfer their risk. This fosters a well-functioning financial market and supports the growth of the economy. Since our founding in 1986...
Alright, I'm not going to play the rest of that because it was a bit of a marketing spiel for Optiva, which is a options trading firm. But yeah, essentially, the gist of it is, it's all about liquidity, and as in every market, you have something that you want to buy or sell, and it depends on the demand for that and how much supply there is. So in terms of what does market making look like for tokens, as we know them, or cryptocurrencies, and how has it evolved over time? For the most part, yeah, we started off with centralized exchanges. You know, the first big one was Mt. Gox, I think, and yeah, all of that is done off chain. You give them control of your crypto, and they have large, you could call them institutional market makers there that sit on the exchanges and provide the liquidity for people like myself and yourself to be able to buy and sell pretty easily. So they have agreements, well, not agreements, but they incentivize people to provide that liquidity via trading fees. So the more you make the markets, the larger fees you get. Around about 2017, 18, the advent of the first order book decentralized exchanges came about. So they were a bit of a step forward in terms of giving back control to people of their assets, and by that I mean non-custodial wallets. where essentially you can still hold on to your crypto whilst still being able to trade it. However, in terms of how that happened, it was via an order book. You would sign a transaction to be able to place an order in the order book. So by an order book, I mean a list of buy and sell prices on each side. And the engine matching would happen off chain as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And essentially, it would match the price that you would set against the price that someone else had set, and you could buy or sell. So that was interesting, because I'm sure some of you have been here since 2017 or even 2013. It was a really interesting time when especially Ether Delta came out. You had these ICOs happening, and it was technically released on the market, the token, but it wasn't listed on a Binance or even a Bittrex. So those who were smart enough and were willing to risk their time would go and trade on Ether Delta, buy them up before it would hit the centralized exchange. And when it hit the centralized exchange, the price would go up. So those were the interesting early days of decentralized exchanges. Fast forward to today, in about 2019, that's when automated market makers, which is what AMM stands for, came to be. So again, you control your own wallet. However, in this scenario, it's not an order book, it's simply liquidity providers. And there's an automated algorithm which Bancor and Uniswap revolutionized, which essentially does the order matching. And he said, people who have a large number of tokens, instead of depositing them on Binance, would deposit them on Uniswap and create a pool for those tokens. And every time those tokens would get traded, they would earn fees. We've been through this before in a couple of meetups, so feel free to check out our previous slide decks. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of how far the market has come in terms of tokens. And in terms of market making, Finematics is a good YouTube channel if you want to learn more about decentralized exchanges. And in terms of this graph, it just goes, I just wanted to bring this interesting tweet up that my friend did around how market makers operate for the most part in exchanges. And what it's essentially saying is there is a minimum price floor that most market makers want to maintain. And depending on how new or old the token is, depends on where that price floor is. So it's a really interesting one, because there is a lot of manipulation that goes on in the market making space. Now, in terms of what does that look like for NFTs? So obviously you go on to OpenSea, it's a marketplace, and you can only really set your fee and buy the NFT once or buy it from someone else. So technically you could say it's P2P. And very much the fees are set by OpenSea, so the fees are centralized. All you have to do there is sign a message to put a buy or sell order and approve the transaction. Fast forward a couple of years later, we had fractionalized NFT marketplaces come up, such as NFTX. And what they decided to do was take that NFT and wrap it into cryptocurrency, which is these tokens here, and then allow people to trade that. And yes, you could say that helped liquidity for NFTs, because it made it not only more affordable for people, because they could afford the fractions, but a bit more efficient. However, it brings all sorts of complications around how do you sell the entire thing, how many fractions are there left over, etc., etc. So from an efficiency perspective, at a smart contract level, not so efficient. And then along came the aggregators. So Genie was the first one, and Gem, and I'll touch on them with a couple of screenshots so I can show you what I mean. So what they did was, they recognized that there was all these different NFT marketplaces popping up. So they decided, hey, why don't we just let people buy or sell NFTs across all of those in bulk, which was cool. And obviously, by virtue of that, the fees and the royalties depend on those marketplaces. But you could bulk list, and for the most part, it's still message signing. So yeah, that's where Sudoswap comes in. So Sudoswap is very much an on-chain protocol, and it creates liquidity pools the same way that Uniswap creates liquidity pools for tokens. The fee setting is set by the pool owner, and so are the royalties. So people can build royalties on top of Sudoswap, and you can bulk list as well. So let's just take a step back and go through a bit of the history of what is Sudoswap. So it was a fun side project started by Owen from 0xMons. It started as an over-the-counter platform for trading NFTs. So as you can see, they have and want. So basically, it was peer-to-peer. So if I had a CryptoPunk and you had a Bored Ape, we could make the trade happen if we saw that our assets were worth the same. Or if you had some USDC and you wanted to buy a 0xMon, you could buy that. Or you could trade multiple NFTs for one NFT. So it was pretty cool. However, yes, being peer-to-peer, you needed someone to actually know about that transaction by either scrolling or sharing a link. Yeah, that's still active today, by the way. So what's version 2? So now we're getting into the meat of it. So version 2 is a fully decentralized automated NFT exchange. So in short, Uniswap for NFTs. So it allows instant liquidity for NFTs via liquidity pools. What does that mean? Compared to OpenSea, where you need to actually set a specific price for someone to be able to buy it. Like let's say you need some money like in 2 days time to pay for something, I don't know, and you see the floor price of that NFT is like 0.1, and you want to really sell it, so you list it just below that floor price at like 0.09, but you still got to wait for someone to actually buy that, and you don't know if you're going to do that. So in the Sudoswap scenario, that's not a problem because the pool would buy it instantly. And what I mean by the pool is, similar to Uniswap, the pool contains Ethereum and NFTs. So if someone wants to sell an NFT, it takes ETH from that pool and it gives it to the seller, and vice versa. If someone wants to buy an NFT, it takes the NFT, etc., etc. So that way it makes NFT trading a whole lot more efficient. And how do I mean by efficient? Well, if you have a pool, you can set your fees, but also you can set price increases along some of these curves. And what I mean by curve is, and I'll go through an example of how this can work for ticketing, event ticketing, a bit later on. It's really interesting because let's say you've got demand for the NFT that keeps going up. You don't want the price to stay stagnant, but at the same time, you don't want people to be setting prices manually to determine how that price is going to go up over time. So you can either set a fixed increase of maybe 0.01 ETH every time someone buys or sells, or you could base it on a percentage, so maybe like 1.5% in price increase every time someone buys. And yeah, guys, feel free to sit down. There's quite a lot of seating. So yeah, what are the advantages of doing this? As I mentioned, you can bulk list NFTs in one transaction, and I'll show you why this is important after this. You can gradually scale in and out of NFT trades. So let's say back in the NFT bull market, the standard position size for a trader was 2 Ethereum at a 0.05 mint price, which is about 40 NFTs. So let's say they've got 40 NFTs and they know it's going to go to, I don't know, 0.2 ETH, but they don't want to wait to actually for it to hit that before they sell it. They could just go onto the Sudoswap and set the price at that price point. And then yeah, over time, as in when the NFT price goes up, it'll sell. So you can actually program your entry and exit. Same deal with rarity, so trade specific or rarity pools. So right now, for you to actually sell NFTs on a rarity basis, you've got to have at least 20 browser tabs open with either gem open, rarity sniper, for you to decide what you're going to sell at what price based on what's rarer. For Sudoswap, that's pretty easy because all you need to do is just determine the rarity categories and then create specific pools for each of those rarities. And yeah, the last couple, I won't touch on the last one, but artist and project own liquidity and fees. So this is a really important one because, as you know, when you're on OpenSea, they charge you 2.5% fee every time you buy or sell an NFT, and that goes to OpenSea, the company. In this model, Sudoswap has a floor fee of 0.5%. That's the max they charge. What that means is people can then build in their fees for their pools on top of that as they see fit. And it's actually being proved really effective. So here are a couple of really good examples of people earning fees on Sudoswap, especially on the right-hand side, DCF God. So basically, he spent 7.5 ETH and bought 23 of mystery bowls. And he put them on a linear curve, that flat one, from 0.4 ETH up to 1 ETH. And it's already made 60 ETH of volume and 5% fee. And he's already made half of that 7.5 ETH that he originally spent purely in fees. So as you can see, if you've got a high demand NFT, especially a Azuki at the moment, and you set the fee around 2.5–5%, it's quite lucrative. So exactly the same as Uniswap, except for NFTs. So yeah, as I mentioned, one use case is bulk listing an NFT. As you can see, you go to OpenSea, there's only one sell button per NFT. Not exactly handy. You go to Gem, and yes, it's a step change improvement. You can select how many are there. They have selected 5 or 6. And it adds it to the cart on the right hand side. And you click proceed to list. However, when you get to here, you've got to set your price for all of them. And then you hit start listing. And this is where it gets a bit clunky. You then have to actually go and approve the listing across all of those marketplaces because they all have different smart contracts. And every single one of these transactions is a MetaMask signature. So you're sitting there having to sign 11 times purely to list these items across all of these marketplaces. So it gets pretty tedious, but hey, if you're a full-time trader, things like this shouldn't really stop you. So yeah, enter Sudoswap. A lot simpler. So similar sort of UX, you go and select your NFTs. And then all you really need to do is calibrate your price, starting price and your price increase settings. You select your NFTs and you approve, and then that's it. No, okay, you don't need to sign 10 million transactions. That's it, your pool is there. So it's really easy to bulk list them.
Stefan?
Yeah?
Are they all on the same chain? Are they all on Ethereum?
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. Sudo's only on ETH.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong button.
Don't pick one of my slides.
Wouldn't want to steal your thunder.
No.
Where was I? Yes, at the moment, so yeah, good question. At the moment, it's only on ETH, and you can only create pools in ETH, and it's only the ERC 721 standard. However, I believe they're going to add 1.55s and other ETH other tokens. although I'm thinking about 1155s, and I'm not too sure why you'd want to use Sudoswap for it, because technically they're all meant to be the same price anyway. But anyway, I'll see what happens there. Use case number 2, as I mentioned, project-owned liquidity. So this is an NFT project called Base Ghouls. I actually have a ghoul. And what they decided to do was start a pool on Sudoswap that was project-owned. So that's what I mean by project-owned liquidity, where basically the NFT project actually puts up some NFTs that they own into a pool and balances out with ETH. The reason why that's interesting is it completely changes the dynamics of how NFT projects launch. A project could actually launch natively on Sudoswap, and instead of being accused of, oh, the founders sold 100 and they dumped and they're not looking after the Twitter, there's actually a more sustainable way of them funding the project over time via fees. And yeah, in this example, they deposited, I think it was 45 ghouls and then the equivalent number of ETH, so 50% value in ghouls, 50% value in ETH, and in 24 hours they already made almost 3 ETH in fees. Yeah, as you could see, they decided to use the exponential price setting here, as demonstrated by that graph. And then yeah, the final one before I think the next one is Rave's coming up anyway. So yeah, I'll finish up with the event ticketing one, and that's a really interesting one. So for this venue, we've got a bit of a minimum deposit we need to pay of $300, and we need to hit a minimum spend of $1,000. We've got a 50-seat minimum, and let's assume if we charged tickets, it could be a $10 starting ticket price. What we could do is mint these event banners as 100 NFTs, start the first pool as an early birds pool, and load it with 30 NFTs for, let's assume USDC is available at 10 USDC. So that's this pool here, and the price will be flat. And yeah, step number 3, as soon as that pool gets, step number 4, as soon as that pool sells out, we take out the 300, we pay the deposit, and that means we can get the event going. And then pool number 2 is this pool here, and it basically takes over when pool number 1 sells out and keeps selling the tickets at an increase of 50 cents per ticket. And yeah, you could say that's for the balance of the 7. Obviously, when pool 2 hits 700, we withdraw it and we pay the remainder to the venue. Now, the reason why this is interesting is it could really help with surge pricing, especially if you don't know as an event venue how you're going to scale your ticket pricing based on demand. You could actually set it based on the exponential percentage setting. It makes it really interesting because let's say you have an oversubscribed event. Point number at the bottom there, the bottom point is you could technically refund the buyers by allowing them to sell that NFT back to the pool if they didn't attend. And you could do that by checking if they attended with ProApps. So I think it really, and I think Papa Fiscantes, as we call him, to the top right, he even said that would be a cool use case for Sudoswap crypto event ticketing using NFT liquidity pools. I'll just show how that works in action. So yeah, that's the sliding graph of revenue, and we would hit the 300 around there, and then the 1,000 around about the 69% mark, just to give you an idea of how we secure the minimum spend for the event. So yeah, it makes for a really interesting use case. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation on Sudoswap. Any questions?
What about royalties? Because I know that that's been a little bit of a thorny issue for creators.
So yes, there's been a lot of FUD about royalties and Sudoswap. However, the general response, it's a twofold response. Response number 1 is artist-owned liquidity or project-owned liquidity as fees. So the model sort of changes to that model. And thing number two is, at least that's what Owen said, is protocols like, I think Reservoir Protocol recently came out. Protocols and marketplaces can build on top of Sudoswap and still enforce royalties that are set by collections. So that's why they've set their fees at 0.5% to be able to provide that delta or that buffer for people to build on top of Sudoswap. So if I go back to the scenario of the evolution of market making for NFTs, you could say all of these marketplaces could build on top of Sudoswap and tap into Sudoswap's liquidity, purely because they're a very efficient way of market making in NFTs. So yeah.
Is there an NFT equivalent of impermanent loss on Sudoswap?
Though, sorry, the question is there an NFT equivalent of impermanent loss in Sudoswap? So, for those of you who don't know, impermanent loss in these marketplaces here, in these AMM indexes, impermanent loss basically means when the value of the token goes up, you lose your ETH value because the pool has to restabilize back to 50-50. So in the NFT space, not so much because the underlying liquidity is in ETH. So it's a different asset as class because it's priced in ETH. Technically, you could say, we're observing this at the moment, right? Last time the ETH price went down a lot, people were adjusting their NFT prices upwards because technically they're still pricing it in USD, especially Fidenzas. They skyrocketed last time ETH went down. So I think the jury's still out. I don't think it's as big an impact on NFTs because of the fact that the market for NFTs is essentially quoted or denominated in ETH. Yeah.
It wouldn't apply for the stable or the linear models.
The beauty of those models is it applies the other way around too. So that base Ghouls pool, it's back down to like 0.1 ETH now because people sold back into it. So it's not just based on price increases. It's the same the other way around as well. And again, I go back to liquidity because if you have a very unliquid an unliquid NFT, then those price changes are going to be worse in terms of the delta. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned before you could determine a pool based on rarity.
Yes.
How would that work? Because wouldn't the token ID be the same? So you could put one in lower rarity, or is there a way of differentiating?
Well.
Can you repeat the question?
So yes, sorry. The question was, when you're setting a rarity specific pool, how do you do that? Is it based on token ID? So there is a standard, I wouldn't say a standard, there is a website that came out recently called Open Rarity, and it's an initiative to standardize how rarity is calculated in the NFT space. But for the most part, to answer your question, no, rarity is not assigned at the metadata level, and you can go and see Etherscan to see what rarity it is because it's very subjective. And I think project and NFT collections themselves don't want to set rarity because then it leads to speculation. But for the most part, you still have to do your own research around what you think the rarity is based on those sites, and then program the pool by yourself.
So it's like I meant more, you couldn't create a pool based on the rarity or the
No.
No.
Yeah, you'd still have to actually manually select the NFTs and put them into a pool that you think would be rare. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's still manual in that sense, yes. I'll leave it there for questions, and I'll hand over to Ray.
I'll just say one or two words about FX Hash because I think it's so exciting. I think that was a very good question, and my understanding is it treats them all as floors. So if you had a rare one, you shouldn't go in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Was you could just deposit a rare, you could deposit a cheap one in a rare pool and then get whatever rare pool was in.
Yeah, it changes. It really changes the way we think of NFTs. And furthermore, I think you're also right. I think that Owen has said that it is possible to create specific pools for rarity levels. Right. Okay. So I think, but it's not. It's still a project that's being grown and so on. But I encourage people to experiment with it because I heard Stefan talk about Sudoswap and I thought there's no way that's right. I can't just buy an NFT on OpenSea and then sell it the same evening. Like, you have to wait ages. Everybody knows you're stuck with some crappy NFT that you foolishly aped into, and it's like, so I bought one. It was an All-Stars, really, really poor sort of thing. But it's shit, really bad. I'll tell you what it is. It's a blurry photograph of the 7-Eleven and then the street art, godforsaken street art sort of kid with sneakers, and it's just wretched. So I bought it. Yeah, I knew you'd like it. So I bought it for $80, and I thought, well, imagine a world in which I thought that was a bad decision, like this world. So I said, I knew there was a pool for All-Stars, and I said, I'm actually going to be able to sell this immediately. Now I did, and I took a hit, but that's fine, because imagine you needed the money straight away. Of course you're going to lose money. It's called liquidity. You're paying for the fact that you can just get rid of it. And I sold it for about $70. And I said, okay, that's all right. I bought an NFT and I sold it immediately at will. Now, normally, as Stefan says, you have to wait for someone to come along and buy it off you on OpenSea. That's how NFTs work, right? They're not liquid. But this is, and it's quite amazing. So I encourage people to just try it out. It's only going to be real if you buy an NFT in the same session, same evening, sell it. Because that's totally new to me. That's changed everything about NFTs. Then they'd just become like ERC20 coins. So I'm going to keep this quick because it's kind of gone on a bit, and that's cool. So anyone who's heard me talk about generative art before, I'm sorry, but I find that it's quite exciting. I want you to be excited by it. It's art and it's blockchain stuff, and that's an exciting combination, and I love it. So this picture here is one that I made in my noodling around because I'm a developer. Are there any developers here? Any people who make websites? Okay. How many? Couple? Okay. So if you know how to make websites, you can make generative art. Okay? That's the good news. And if you're talented like me, you can make beautiful, meaningful pictures with. Take a look at that. That's a good one. Wait, it took me ages. But anyway.
I like that highlight.
I worked so hard on that. Which bit?
The purple on the left.
Oh yeah.
On the left on the bed.
Oh yeah. See that? Man's inhumanity to man, I call that bit. So I call this project Bored Fidenza. Everything's bored nowadays. So you can generate these with a little JavaScript library called P5.js. Okay? So I'm going to get a little bit technical because I think people don't know where this stuff comes from and they just kind of assume it just mysteriously appears, right? So I did that with a few lines of P5.js code. Now, when I say a few lines, it took me a month to write those few lines, but that's fine because I knew what I wanted and it took me a while to get. So FX Hash is a website that is a generative art marketplace, okay, on the Tezos blockchain. I'll cut to the most important part of that. So Tezos is a proof of stake blockchain, right? So that means that it is like Ethereum is now. It is a website. Okay, I'll get back. Sorry. So we know what generative art means. It's making art with algorithms. Okay, that's where the programming skill comes in. That's where people who can program and who have an artistic statement to make are in their element. The best examples are art blocks, which are still some of the most blue chip NFTs around. What do they sell for now? Like hundreds of thousands of dollars or something like Fidenza?
At least 100 each.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that they're on-chain, which I talked about at the talk I gave for Stefan a couple of months ago. They are not linked like Bored Ape pictures to a JPEG that's sitting somewhere else. They are actually on-chain. Why does that matter? Well, if you walk into an art gallery and you buy a painting and the painting fades in a week, you'd be kind of miffed, right? They're going out of their way to say this is going to stay yours and usable as long as Ethereum is up, and that's quite a thing to say. Are profile pictures, NFT pictures, generative? Kind of, because you have to write an algorithm to make them. But they're composed of pre-made pictures of apes, hats, cigars, earmuffs. What are those Russian hats? Frank, you're German. Yeah. Yeah.
We wear German hats.
Okay, German hats there. What's a German hat called? What's a schnuffle fluffle? What do you call them?
Bucket heads.
Buckethead. That's a guitarist. What are you talking about? Buckethead.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so you'd have folders and folders full of these images and you combine them. But they are assembled randomly, but according to a strict schema. In other words, you're never going to get the cigar in the guy's ear or the hat underneath. You know, they're kind of very pre-programmed to make a Bored Ape, right? So the space is quite small, even though the Bored Apes, for instance, vary by 170 dimensions, which is quite amazing. So with long-form generative art, which is what FX Hash is interested in, there is no curation, right? This is a big deal, okay? This makes something interesting. These are a bunch of my bored fidenzas that I made and put them in a folder, right? In the old days, an artist would go, yeah, that's too dark, and then they'd take the best ones. In fact, as Tyler Hobbs says, sometimes you would only see one picture by an artist from an algorithm, from a way that they do something. They would spend all this time doing stuff, and then pick out one, and that's it. With long-form generative art, which is what FX Hash is getting us to do, you have to get it right every time. So this example here of the actual fidenza, believe it or not, they all come from exactly the same algorithm. If you purchase a fidenza and you press that button, the image only exists at that time. The artist has never seen it. Nobody knows what it's going to be like. And it's a tribute to the complexity and the artistic integrity that these three pictures come from that one algorithm, right? Because there's quite a variety there, and it could have easily all just crashed the app, or become white or black, or just, you know, anyone who's programmed knows how hard it must be to do that. So the skill in long-form generative art is in making stuff that is aesthetically appealing and works algorithmically. It's not going to crash, right? That's why that stuff is worth millions and that stuff. So the Tezos network, it's self-amending, it doesn't have hard forks unlike BTC, it's simple as XTC, but its tokens are known as Tez, as in, brother, can you spare some Tez? Uses proof of stake. It has bakers, not miners, and weirdly, the city with the most nodes is by far is Dublin, Bagara. So, yeah, nobody I know is running. So they are all on the Tezos blockchain, hence they're clean NFTs, right? So that is some sort of big deal for some people about the environment or something. So you require an XTZ wallet to interact with it. It's the same as anything. You have to connect your wallet, right? They're often interactive. I'm going to show you one that I own because we're not used to interactive NFTs, right? Look, that's my balloon. I bought that balloon NFT, right? Look at it move. It's actually interactive. I wouldn't mind that hanging on my wall. I would put that in a frame. That cost $4, right? There's only about 70 of them. Check this out. Whoa. Check it. Whoa, $4. Check this shit. Look at this. See, keeps moving. You just move the balloons. I'm not happy with the balloons where that was all wrong. You just move and go down and let them go on, right? So the rare, so for example, the scarcity things are when this guy, some French dude, the randomness is like the colors of the balloons, the sky that he used to do, and the number of balloons, right? So they're usually quite interactive, which I found quite interesting. This is FX Hash, by the way. Very, very simple website, very black and white. There's often very low numbers of additions, right? Something like 250. The idea is that you make your own code and you have to upload it. So there's a little bit of, it's a little bit more hands-on, and it suits a certain mentality where people want to get involved in the process of making an NFT. You download a JavaScript type of GitHub thing. I've already seen half the people going, fuck that, I'm not doing that, right? But stick with me, because I find it very rewarding. I find it really exciting, because if you consider the alternatives, if you go to OpenSea and you want to make an NFT project, what do? You just kind of click through a bunch of screens that say make a collection, and you drag some JPEGs in. It's like crap. That's not, come on. We can do better than that, right? So this thing says in order to make an NFT project with, and they call the whole project a generative token, and they call the individual NFTs iterations. But nonetheless, the principle is exactly the same. And the hard part is, when you do your own generative work, when you go home and want to make a little bit of a JavaScript sort of thing using P5.js and make some lovely squiggles and so on, that's fine. But every time you do it again, it's different because it's random. That's the whole point, right? So they're saying you've got to bottle that randomness, and it's got to be that you can reproduce it on demand, because if someone buys one, they have to see the exact same thing each time. And that's quite hard. And that's called the FX hash. They give you an FX hash number, base 58 encoded value, that when the person buys the token, that creates a transaction hash on the Tezos blockchain. That's like a receipt. If when you buy something on the blockchain, you get a little receipt, like a little transaction hash, right? They're saying, take that transaction hash and use it to generate the randomness. It's really quite ingenious, right? Because it must be unique. And use that to generate pseudo-random values. Now again, I realize that I've lost probably some of you, but like, hey, come on. Stefan's talk was at least as difficult to follow as mine, so you'll bear with me, right? But I think it's important to understand where the skill and the artistry overlap in this. They're going out of the way to say we'll guarantee uniqueness of these, because one of the biggest problems when you make these things is guaranteeing that in the space that they're unique, right? So they're doing that. No transactions can be the same.
How many lines of code is your artwork?
It's only about 40, really. Yeah. It's not much. Like I've deliberately kept it so that it's. There's only 4 ways it varies: how much they bend in, how long these lines are, how many of the lines there are, and something about some color stuff. Like you can really, I've deliberately made it similar to Fidenza because I think that's beautiful. Now, one thing I'll say is, you won't fail to notice that kind of looks organic, and that's hard to do just with code. Code generally tends to be straight lines and so on. There's what's called an algorithm called flow fields, okay? And it's really, really interesting, and it generates organic looking randomness. And I've, flow fields, go to Tyler Hobbs. He's by far the most interesting character to follow. He's Fidenza, but he's a brilliant writer, and he writes about this, and he gives you a pseudocode example, and you can get going pretty quick. And you just copy it in, change it to JavaScript, right? Rplots is the famous blue chip, generative on-chain Ethereum thing. Flow fields is the algorithm that Fidenza is from. It gives it a nice natural look, and you'll see it everywhere once you see it. P5.js is the JavaScript library, and it's the only one, I believe, that Rplots allows to be embedded in your code. They normally say no, it's got to be self-contained, but they said that because that's so ubiquitous, we'll allow that to be used. But it's a very good skill to have to know about P5.js. So these are, if you want to get into NFT collecting, and I think everyone here wants to get into NFT collecting. It's fun, right? But it's expensive. If you go to OpenSea, it's expensive, right? The stuff is dear, and about 6 months ago, the gas fees were like, $100 or something like that. It's ridiculous. Yeah. These are some of my collection that I just bought. There's my balloons. None of these are above $10. I love them, and I've sold a few of them since. What you do is, you buy them, say, you buy it for 4 TES, which is about $6, and immediately relist it for 5 TES. If someone buys it, it's win-win-win. I win, I got more than I paid for it. The artist wins, they get royalty. And the sucker who bought it off me wins because they get a crappy NFT that I don't want anymore. So it's win-win-win. It's a very easy way to get into NFT collecting. And you follow these people on Twitter, and they're usually like, I will check them out on Twitter. They've been doing this for years. They've got a good website with credible articles on there. And I'll go, yeah, I'll give them some of my money. But what's the worst that can happen? I spend $6 on an NFT. So I was going to show you how the actual tokens are generated because my laptop doesn't connect. But what I want to impress on you is, this is a very good website which is only dedicated to generative art. There are no monkey JPEGs here. Okay, there are no JPEGs that you can be roped on. They're not linking to assets that someone could take away. They're all generative. That means every single token is guaranteed to be on the blockchain. It's like a poor man's art blocks. That's a sort of a way to describe it. And we need those because it can't just be art blocks, because those things are just way out of anyone's affordability at the moment. So I would say, if you want to get started in generative art, helps to know JavaScript. Sorry if you don't, but if you're interested, you'll learn. I had to learn some stuff in this that I wasn't familiar with, but I had some of the skills. Traditional abstract art, Bridget Riley, Victor Vasarely, and who can forget Jason Pollock?
Oh, I was calling him Jackson.
Well, you should. His name is Jason Pollock. It's Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, Jackson.
Jason's the joke on you, because it's your birthday.
There we go.
Only one of the most famous 20th century artists that you couldn't get the same one. So that's it. Go to fxhash.xyz and start, but you can buy some TES there and you can start buying NFTs. I think it's a fantastic way to get started in NFTs. Sell them for a few bucks up. There you go. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Rafe. I learned a lot about FX Hash because I didn't know you could buy NFTs that cheap, so that was great.
Yeah, I found them. I'll find cheap stuff anywhere.
Yeah, nice.
Is that because it's on Tezos and nobody does anything on Tezos?
Actually, no. I actually think
Haters gonna hate.
it's got quite a big community actually. Arguably, I would say Tezos is the second blockchain with the number of NFTs after Ethereum. Like, it's got a huge community. And yeah, I mean, it's not very well known, but it's very much the generative community.
It is in generative art.
Yeah.
That's where all the cool kids hang out.
You could say that, or maybe all the underground kids. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I'm just gonna finish off with a quick giveaway. So, yes, I think we're doing a hoodie giveaway. It's not just a regular giveaway. There's a bit of a survey there that you can complete with a few questions around if you understand what ArtLink is. And it's optional for you to enter an email, but if you want to participate in the giveaway, you have to enter an email so we can know who won. And yeah, the beauty is you could come onto our website and place your NFT on the merch or use one of our licensed NFTs. And yeah, we'll issue with 100% discount code for that. We've got primarily AS Color, which is just down the road here, in stock. However, we're working on a couple of pretty big partnerships with Pixels.com and Prodigy.com around offering global delivery on licensed merchandise. Pixels.com is going to be a really good one because they're the company that owns Fine Art America, and yeah, we want to be able to offer one-for-one artists the opportunity to be able to sell licensed prints, as in wall art, etc., etc. So yeah, if you could take some time to fill in the survey, it would be really appreciated. And yeah, after this we're gonna have some more drinks. So yeah, thanks everyone.
And not having a leaf